Final Fantasy VII Remake is an action RPG by Square Enix.
Fans have waited over a decade for this reimagining of the original game of the same name.
But was it worth the wait?
Watch the entire video to find out.
Hello everyone, I'm Teal.
And I'm Teal.
And we're with Studio Blue.
Today we're going to analyze, review, and ultimately answer the question, is Final Fantasy VII Remake worth your money?
To answer, we'll take a look at the good, the bad, and the potential, and then point out what the developers could have done differently to improve the game.
Then we'll rank the game according to a 5-point system and give our final recommendation.
A quick note before we get started. If you enjoy our content, please press that like button, click on subscribe, and ring the notification bell to get alerted to new videos.
Also, please comment. Tell us what we've done right, what we've done wrong, and how we can do better. We try to improve with every video.
Lastly, we create final videos like this one after we complete a playthrough of the game on livestream. So this is less of a critique and more of a summarized review.
Exactly. If you want to see the actual streams, they'll be linked below.
So, shall we get started?
Yep, let's jump right on in.
Let's start with the game's development history because, wow, there was a lot that happened.
The original Final Fantasy VII, which we will call the OG for the rest of this video, was developed in 1997 by Square for the PlayStation. While it was a massive commercial success, it had some glaring flaws.
A rough narrative, cringeworthy moments, and characters who just didn't matter. While it deserves its place in video game history, it was far from perfect.
To be fair, it did give us one of the most famous, or infamous, villains ever, Sephiroth.
Yeah, not to mention the 10 million overuses of One-Winged Angel.
Hey, don't be jealous.
After a number of false starts and relentless teases, Square, now Square Enix, finally announced development of a remake in 2015. This would be the fourth game after the OG, following behind Crisis Core, Before Crisis, and Dirge of Cerberus.
Not to mention the movies Advent Children and Last Order.
You get the feeling that Hironobu Sakaguchi, the creator of Final Fantasy, likes Final Fantasy VII?
I think he likes money.
Oh, I like money.
Tetsuya Nomura, the character designer for the OG, was the creative director for the remake, while Nobu Uematsu and Masashi Hamauzu, along with several others, created the game's musical score. It was also decided that it would be episodic in a sense, a reimagining where the OG would be split up into several standalone games.
The whole thing lingered in a sort of miniature development hell for a while, as originally large parts of it were outsourced to multiple external partners. However, on May 24th, 2017, it was announced that all development was moving in-house for quality control. And on April 10th, the game was released. Fans could finally return to Midgar with Cloud and the others.
The point of all this is that Final Fantasy VII Remake had some fans excited and some dubious. It had to follow a megalith of gaming. Could it even hold a candle to the original?
We wanted to find out, so we decided that Teal would take up the challenge. And now it's time for us to give our final thoughts on this extremely ambitious undertaking.
As with everything we review, we're going to be kind when it's done right, harsh when it's done wrong, and when it's over, showcase to the world how we think things could be done to improve.
So if you're a developer yourself, take notes now and learn from the pros and cons of Final Fantasy VII Remake.
Okay, so what is Final Fantasy VII Remake about? On the surface, it's a reimagining of the Midgar section of the OG, starting with the Reactor 1 bombing mission and ending with the escape from Midgar to chase after Sephiroth.
But it goes far, far deeper than that. As Teal said, this is a reimagining. Calling it a remake is a bit misleading. From massively expanding the game's central storyline and secondary characters to its surprise twists at the end. No spoilers just yet. It's obvious that Square Enix not only wants to improve where the OG lacked, it wants to take this series in a decisively different direction.
Exactly, and like Teal said, no worries on spoilers yet. We'll clearly tell you when we're about to discuss them. But let's summarize the game's main action.
Apart from the last hour or so, it's almost exactly what fans of the OG would remember, but with so much more added into it. Story arcs that were originally glossed over, such as preparing for the Reactor 5 mission, were greatly expanded upon. Story arcs that were given more attention in the OG, like the collapse of the Sector 7 plate or the storming of the Shinra HQ, now span multiple chapters.
Then there are the characters. Not only are the primary ones like Cloud, Tifa, Barret, and Aerith given far more depth and development, but the secondary characters like the Avalanche members, Don Corneo, and the Shinra executives have entire arcs from beginning to end.
The mechanics are, for the most part, relatively solid. It's an action RPG that builds upon the foundation of games like Kingdom Hearts and Final Fantasy XV to bring a very seamless experience. You press the square button to do a regular attack, hold it to do a powerful attack, and press triangle to do a unique skill, like Cloud changing attack modes, or Barret and Tifa doing a sort of charge attack, or Aerith doing a powerful magic blast. Cloud and Tifa are short range but will jump up to attack airborne enemies, while Barret and Aerith are longer range and don't really go aerial.
But the real magic of the system is the command menu. You see, you gain ATB charges, yeah, they call them ATB in honor of the OG system, by attacking, taking damage, parrying, and more. By pressing X, you slow time down to a crawl, giving you chances to burn your ATB segments, up to 2 at once, to do anything from special attacks called abilities to casting magic to summoning. Abilities are both original powers as well as ones based on old limit breaks like Braver and Focus Shot. Some of these abilities even stack or have powered up versions if your ATB meter is fully charged.
Limit breaks make a return and can be extremely powerful, and summons, which can only be used in certain fights, can turn the tide of battle. The materia system is similar enough to the OG, but with modifications for an ARPG. Honestly, we could spend all day talking about the mechanics of this game, so let's move on.
The game is split into chapters, 18 of them to be exact, and follows Cloud and whoever is traveling with him. By the time you get to the end of the game, you'll have all 4 members plus 1 guest you cannot control.
This information alone should tell you that this game was a risky undertaking by Square Enix. They departed greatly from the OG formula from start to finish, relying more on innovation and immersion to pull players in than the predictable familiarity. If this game didn't take, it would be a major blow to the studio.
Now for the positives. First, let's start with the graphics. My god, they are gorgeous. Square Enix uses the Unreal Engine 4 in ways that we've never seen before, and they do it with a grace that is simply spectacular. The landscapes are breathtaking, such as Midgar when topside or seeing the underside of the city while in the slums. Even viewing the outside world when scaling the broken plate is nothing short of amazing.
But it goes deeper than mere views. The texturing and use of shaders are incredible. Stones in a sewer look wet, water flows realistically, and metal shines with either a sharp sheen or a dull finish, depending on if it's new or not. The materia slots on every weapon accurately show which materia is equipped. And the characters' faces. Oh wow, their faces. The combination of the realistic look from Advent Children and a stylized look makes them something truly beautiful to behold. You'll be pulled toward the attractive Cloud, Tifa, or Aerith, impressed with the imposing Barret or Heidegger, and disgusted by the smarmy Don Corneo or emaciated Hojo. And when Sephiroth shows up, oh my god, it's impressive.
But if the game looks good, it sounds immaculate, as the composers took tracks from the OG and remixed them into something truly special. There are several versions of the original battle theme, each one a bit different than the last. Here's the music from the first bombing mission. If that got your blood pumping, wait until you hear what they did with the Airbuster theme, changing from the familiar Those Who Fight Further into a symphonic suite that changes with the phases of battle, going from this to this, and beyond. Tell you what, if you want to hear what amazing music sounds like, click on the OST link in the description below to go to the official Square Enix Japan page and sample sounds you will never forget. We'll wait.
If you're back, let's talk about the voice acting. Every single one of them is on point. From the main cast to secondaries to background support, everyone sounds like you'd expect. Expertly acted with plenty of emotion and professional delivery. Cody Christian kills it as Cloud Strife. John Eric Bentley makes Barrett Wallace into something memorable. Britt Baron makes Tifa Lockhart into a true heroine. And Brianna White brings Aerith Gainsborough into the spotlight she truly deserves as the planet's Messiah character.
Ever been attacked by an invisible enemy? Wearing robes. Came and went like the wind. At first. Only saw them after she grabbed me. Get help.
Mako is the lifeblood of our world. You gonna stand there and pretend you can't hear the planet crying out in pain? I know you can!
Get help.
But you're a more discerning customer, aren't you? Well, most people would say something sweet right about now.
Get help.
No one's going to attack you, I promise. Don't worry about it. They're a lot tougher than they look. This place, it has a kind of power.
Get help.
But it goes even further than that. All of the characters are voiced excellently, whether it be Jesse Raspberry from Avalanche,
No extremist group Avalanche. Public enemy number 1. Gets your heart racing, doesn't it?
the disgusting Don Corneo,
Yes, I am! Here I come, baby!
the sadistic Scarlet,
Show me something truly exquisite.
or the psychotic Hojo.
Quite frankly, there's no telling what kind of properties a crossbred specimen might possess.
No one is poorly voice acted, and when Sephiroth shows up and speaks, well, just listen.
Oh, you need not remind me. It was the crowning moment of our time together. But that was then, and this is now.
Outside of mere presentation, the game plays amazingly. The controls are smooth, the materia system translates well to an ARPG, and every boss fight is truly special. Here are a few examples. The Scorpion mech from the beginning is a memorable introduction to bosses. The Turks Reno and Rude, both alone and together, are strategically challenging and fun, and the Airbuster is one of the most well thought out multiple phase boss fights we've ever experienced. And those motorcycle chases, yes, there's more than one, are simply incredible.
We don't want to spoil the final boss fights in the last two chapters, but those are even better, taking cinematic presentation and gameplay to a level we've never experienced before. Just understand that when you go up that elevator at the end of Hojo's lab to begin the finale of the game, every wish you've ever had as a Final Fantasy fan will be fulfilled in a way that is both elegant and god-tier awesome.
Now let's talk about the characters. By the 9, they didn't cheese anyone. We've talked enough about the primary cast, so let's focus on the secondary and tertiary characters. Avalanche finally gets its due. Biggs, Wedge, and Jesse were underplayed, underdeveloped, and underloved in the OG. In Final Fantasy VII Remake, they are finally given character arcs that are so well-rounded and complete that by the time you get to the terrible battle to stop the Sector 7 plate's collapse, you're completely invested in their stories.
But there's more, so very much more. There are minor characters who barely get a blip in the OG, and some who don't even show up at all. There's too many to discuss in completion, but Marl in Sector 7 and Mayor Domino really come to mind. These literal throwaway characters in the OG are given a treatment worthy of their positions in their in-game communities, both below and above the plates.
Then you have characters who are background characters, but are still given the same treatment in life as the others. For example, there is a Shinra middle manager that Barrett confronts on the train, and this man is completely loyal to his company, even defending them and condemning Avalanche. You later see him with his children, and you realize that he's literally just a salaryman trying to make a living for his family, and that Avalanche, regardless of the purity of their motivations, is destroying his livelihood. Another example is an old woman who appears briefly in the background when Cloud assists Jesse in raiding a supply depot. As a member of Midgard security attempts to usher her to safety, she mentions that she's a veteran from the Wutai War and is not afraid. The man thanks her for her service before offering to escort her home. We won't talk about Chadley, because he speaks for himself.
Perfectly balanced muscle and bone structure. An optimal candidate. My name is Chadley. I'm an intern for Shinra's Research and Development Division.
They even do it with the villains. While you have completely despicable bastards like Don Corneo, Hojo, Heidegger, or Scarlet, you have just as many who are fleshed out and feel like real people with real reasons for being bad guys. Although I want to talk about the new character of Roche, Teal has a much better example of villains done right in the remake.
I loved what they did with President Shinra. He was such a weak character in the OG, but in the remake, he is a fully fleshed out villain that even has a palatable, if not overtly nationalistic, backstory. For example, you go into the Shinra history exhibit and you see how he built up the company from nothing, as well as how he stepped up in the war against Wutai. And then there are the Turks, especially Reno and Rude. No longer are they jerks who are just following orders. Now, they are people who feel true regret at what they've done, at the lives they've taken. Saying to themselves that they were just doing their job is as much a comfortless lie as it is an admittance of a guilty conscience.
These moments of humanization lend so much life to the world. Nothing is stagnant. Nothing is throwaway. These are people living their lives with their hopes and dreams and fears and needs. If the Final Fantasy VII Remake series can keep broadening this world while making it feel this alive and this true, then when Sephiroth threatens the planet in its entirety,
there will never be a villain we'd want to destroy more.
Developers, take note. That's how you create an emotional impact.
Finally, we enter spoiler territory with the ending, so we'll be brief. Make sure to skip ahead to the critical points if you want to avoid the spoilers.
The final chapters of the game introduce the possibility of the remake being an alternate timeline from the OG, one where things aren't as they were the first time around. There's a lot of speculation, but a few things are for certain. These Whispers, or Arbiters of Fate as Red 13 calls them, are trying to maintain the OG timeline. Aerith and Sephiroth are keenly aware of the OG events, and Zack Fair lives. Something is obviously up, something that went terribly wrong, and as Sephiroth says to Cloud in the final moments of the game,
7 seconds till the end. Time enough for you, perhaps. But what will you do with it? Let's see.
Clearly, they are departing from the original game in a way that will have major implications. And everything from the new timeline to the connection between this and other Square Enix properties is truly unknown. The sky's the limit and the journey is ours to enjoy.
However, despite the amazing positives, when this game comes short of expectations, it's very noticeable.
The worst is the companion AI. While we eventually learned to work with it, the game relied too much on actively switching between party members, especially during boss fights. There was never a point where we could just put our minds in park and play. There needs to be a way to change companion behavior beyond just issuing commands one at a time. A sort of fight defensively, or buff me, or heal when I'm weak methodology.
This game could really benefit from something like the Gambit system from Final Fantasy XII, or the way companions are handled in the latter Kingdom Hearts games, modernized for current times, of course. Give us the ability to turn it on or off, but give us something to control the AIs on a package level when we don't want to focus on switching between them.
While we respect the way the game handles switching between characters and issuing commands to them, forcing the player to constantly divide their attention among 3 characters, what they are doing and what they can do next, is just not good game design. We have seen older games with far less complexity do this amazingly, so there is no excuse for a AAA title in 2020 to have this problem.
Side note, the Hell House battle is completely ridiculous and really angered us on stream. While we can appreciate the old school tell of the color of the windows denoting elemental weakness, this is not 1997. It's inexcusable for a game of this professional magnitude to have something like that. Whoever in the development team thought that this was a good idea, don't do that again. The rest of your boss battles are amazing and challenging in their own right. Do those sort of things again, but for the Hell House, don't do that.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't get into it because they would never.
Also, for the Hell House, as well as other bosses, there were a ton of missed opportunities to make the battles truly cinematic. Consider adding things like being able to limit break within the house when swallowed, or having a short moment to use an ability when an enemy initiates an attack. While yes, there are bosses where hitting them at the right time with the right ability instantly staggers them, there could have been many more of these chance moments that would have really made the player feel smart and clever. We need more of those in future versions of the game.
As for the level design, when it wasn't explorable dungeons, they were too linear and corridor-like, and that was way too common. We get that Midgar is a city, and we get that the Midgar chapter of the OG is highly linear, but it didn't have to be that way in this game. The collapsed highway was the worst offender, but overall many levels are not interesting. We would like to have seen the levels spread out more, like the actual slums, instead of whatever this is.
And I'm just going to say this. Hojo's lab was horrendously and unnecessarily long. By the maker, we stayed on stream longer than we ever had playing through it. And even in our replays offline, we started going, when will this end? When your player is more concerned about how much longer a dungeon is than actually enjoying it, you know you've gone too far. That dungeon needs to be about half its length.
Outside of the extremely challenging hard mode, which some players might find too much, there isn't a ton of replay value to this game. It's not terrible, as the chapter revisit option allows you to get items you may have missed, such as Aerith's second limit break, but there isn't much of a reason to play the game after you win other than trophy hunting, getting all the costumes, and maxing everything out. There isn't much in the way of story branches, and that along with the linear maps really hurt the game beyond the first playthrough.
Oh, but then there's the biggest sin of all. One that after the hype of playing the game wore off, we saw glaring like meteor about to wipe out all life on the planet. Every single time that you have a feeling of true urgency and then enter a full-size dungeon, the momentum of the game is killed dead in its tracks. Why would any game developer place an entire ghost yard between the player and the impending collapse of the Sector 7 plate? We could hear the game come to a grinding halt, and it was absolutely infuriating. If you're a developer and you're watching this, please take this advice. Never, never put a long dungeon between your player and the time-sensitive destination, even if there is no timer. It doesn't matter how good your writing is or how much the characters freak out over the impending disaster. Dropping the tension when something bad is happening that the character needs to get to just kills the emotional momentum.
But there is a fix to that, one that Teal and I discussed after agreeing on this critical point.
Yes, and Final Fantasy VII Remake could have done this. In the case of the Sector 7 plate collapse, for example, have the battle visible in the backdrop of the ghost yard, along with flames, gunfire, and helicopters. That would have done the trick.
So developers, again, take note. If you have to, if you must, do what Square Enix did, put the impending disastrous event in the background and make it very, very clear. Let the player see what's at stake. Use the environment to tell your story, because while you can tell them that this bad thing is going to happen,
nothing is stronger than showing them what will happen should they fail.
Now on to our 5 points. First, the story. It's actually pretty good. It's engaging when it needs to be, paced in a positive way, and gives us a sense of where things can go, even though we don't know for sure what comes next.
It fixed a lot of the issues the OG had, where some parts were too short and others were too long. If the remaining games continue this trend, it will be a good reimagining of the 1997 game, and we'll definitely continue playing it.
Overall, the story is good, solid, and enjoyable.
We give it a ranking of 4 out of 5 slimes.
Next, there are the characters. This is where the game truly shines. There are no characters we didn't love to love or love to hate, and no one felt superfluous. I'll say it again, if they can keep this trend up, they'll make Sephiroth attempting to destroy the planet into one of the highest stakes in a video game we've ever known.
Characters we vehemently disliked are now beloved. For example, I hated Aerith in the OG, and barely tolerated her in Advent Children and Kingdom Hearts. She was a flat Mary Sue to me. Now I like her. She's a good character, one I'm invested in and want to see succeed. And Teal, who couldn't stand Cloud since the OG came out, is now a fan of the spiky-haired ex-soldier.
When you can make Teal and me like characters that we once hated, that is an amazing job in and unto itself. But the truth is there are no characters in the game that we would have removed.
So we give it a ranking of 5 out of 5 slimes.
Then there is the presentation. Mostly it's good. The linear maps got on our nerves, and the lack of story branches outside of how Cloud gets his hand massaged and what dress Aerith wears made us roll our eyes, but it wasn't enough to turn us away.
Visually and orally, the game is perfect, and the sense of cinema is some of the best we've ever seen. But again, losing that sense of urgency deals the overall experience a heavy blow.
It's a balance, we know, but none of the negatives were enough to ruin our enjoyment, and that's important.
Exactly. So we give it 4 out of 5 slimes.
Now we come to the playability. Much like presentation, it's mostly good. My rant about the Hell House and our complaints about the companion AI aside, the biggest issue is that we didn't feel like the regular fights taught us how to make the most out of the battle system prior to boss fights.
It's a tenet of good game design to teach a mechanic, enforce the mechanic, and then test the mechanic, usually through a boss fight. And while this game doesn't ignore it, it doesn't embrace it either. We feel that a lot of the time the game missed that mark and suffered for it.
We do, however, love how the developers transitioned the turn-based strategy into action-based, especially with the inclusion of classic mode for those who want the nostalgic touch. But there was a little too much inventory management, especially if you wanted to handle things like materia growth and weapon upgrades yourself, and that drug it down. Overall, solid, but not perfect.
This is the weakest category, ranking in at 3 out of 5 slimes.
Lastly, there is the fun factor. This is pretty high because despite the game's flaws, it's simply fun to play. There are a few parts that are not enjoyable, and we've already hammered those points home, but those are few and far between.
Players like me who don't have good reaction times can get into this game, either through easy or classic mode, and that's really appreciated. But when you bring it all together, this is a fun game that any RPG fan can get into and enjoy.
Yup, and that's the key piece, any RPG fan. If you love RPGs, especially this series, then you will have a blast with this game.
The fun factor is strong, ranking at 4 out of 5 slimes.
So taking all of that into account, that gives this game a total score of
4 slimes.
With never in doubt.
So, would Studio Blue recommend Final Fantasy VII Remake?
If you are a fan of RPGs or story-centric games, then yes, absolutely. There are many more things right about this game than wrong, and it's a true treat from start to finish. If you're like us, old school Final Fantasy fans who got jaded somewhere around FF13, this is the perfect reason to come back.
However, if you're not a fan of RPGs, if the Final Fantasy series means nothing to you, or if you prefer open world games, you probably want to dig deeper into this one or watch some footage before committing to the $60 price tag.
At the end of the day, Final Fantasy VII Remake succeeds where the OG failed and opens the door to a new way of handling episodic RPGs. In many ways, it's both an apology and a love letter to fans of the original, while pulling in people who have never played it into a homogeneous mixture of awe and glee. If Final Fantasy VII Remake can ride the momentum of its current success, it will prove that not only does Square Enix deserve the admiration and adoration of its fans, it deserves the respect it gained when we first heard that famous chorus to that famous song.
If you enjoyed this content, please give it a like and a subscribe. Each time Teal and I finish a critical play of a game on stream, we'll put out a dissection review video like this, so that other developers can learn from the mistakes of the professionals.
On Twitch, the link is below, we stream a classroom on game development and writing every Monday at 9 p.m. Central Time, and stream our critical play series every Wednesday and Thursday at 6 p.m. Central. Friday night is when we stream a 2 to 3 hour AMA where we chat with our friends and fans about anything under the sun. We hope you'll join us.
Exactly. So if you like what you saw, lay the smack down that like button below, subscribe to our channel, consider supporting us on Patreon, connect with us over Facebook, Twitter, Discord, and we'll see you in the next video.
See you next time.